I had quite a bumpy ride in a sense of with fatigue and that. I still um, got a side effect from post-transplant. It's called neuropathy, where I struggle. I've got nerve damage in the bottom of my feet, and I use a cane to walk. So in that sense, I had that from obviously the chemotherapy and the full body radiation, which was effective towards my nerves, and that I struggled quite a lot with walking. I had to see some physios and a lot of, I had a personal trainer to try help me sort of re-walk again because I had so much nerve damage in my legs and I was bedridden for quite a while that I needed to just take baby steps and gradually from there moved on. So 2.5 years later, I feel a lot better, obviously, than I was when I was ill, and I'm walking quite a lot, even though I do have a cane that I walk with because of my neuropathy. It helps me just climb upstairs a bit easier because I'm slightly off balance. But I do go for long walks. I walk in the city where I work, and I walk to and from bus stops and train stations. So I've got quite a lot of mobility back. So I'm quite happy and excited about that.
The transplant affected me physically by just the level of fatigue I felt after my transplant. And it just seemed to be endless. The fatigue just seemed to go on and on and on. And I think that did make me feel quite down, actually. For me, I think that period of fatigue probably went on for 12 months. My advice would be A, to try and keep active, but B, not to overdo it. So if you do something one day, I remember if I went out and met friends one day that weren't necessarily nearby to where I was, and it was a bit of a travel out for me. Or even sometimes if I went to the hospital, that was a little bit further out for me as well. The next few days afterwards I would rest and I would listen to my body as well.
I would get up some mornings at 8 o'clock and by 10 o'clock I was on the sofa having a nap, which is not something I'd ever really done before in my life. So it mentally affects you that you're so fatigued as well. You know, it's such a shock to you that you are just fast asleep within an hour or two of waking up. For me, it lasted probably 5-6 weeks, and it started to improve after that. And I did purposefully try to do everything the doctors had told me, which would be beneficial to help relieve the symptoms of fatigue. Make sure that if you have exercised, that you then sit down on the sofa, have a cup of coffee or tea, whatever it is, and rest after having done that. And don't be hard on yourself. Most of the time it's all right. Yes, some days it does get tedious and you do feel like, I wish this was over, but don't we feel that about a lot of things in life? So just look on the positive side.
I think it was about 6 weeks after I was discharged and I'd been at home going back for a check-in appointment and saying to one of the doctors who was seeing me, who was reviewing me on the day, saying, I'm probably going to think I'm being a really stupid or ask you this question, but I just want to know from my own mind, when can I go back to the gym? When can I start doing exercise again? Because I found I really benefited from it. And she looked at me and she said, you know what, Rizwana, you could actually go back today. And that really, it took me back. I was like, really? Can I? Will I be okay kind of thing, worrying about infections and worrying about how I would manage. And she was like, no, you can go back today. So the next day I did. I went back. And I think I used it as part of my recovery, was exercise. And again, it's going back to the routine and having that routine of physically, I would try and do something every couple of days.
Initially, I was very tired, and everything felt like an effort. You know, coming home from when I first came out of hospital, just walking upstairs felt like my legs felt like they were made of lead, and everything felt very heavy. And prior to that, I hadn't really understood the distinction between tiredness and fatigue. But then each day it got slightly easier and slightly easier. And by the time you know, by the time sort of 2 weeks had passed, I only experienced the fatigue after physical exercise. I noticed an improvement in my ability to be able to get on with normal life. And one of the things I would gauge it by was the fact that I could, you know, I could walk or stand without my ankles swelling. One of the best tips I'd say about managing fatigue is not to try and get back to normal life too soon. That remember, you've been through a really serious treatment and that you're actually not going to be back to normal within weeks or even months, and to give yourself time.
The transplant affected me physically in ways that I was a little bit upset in the way that it affected me, but of course I had to expect it. I regularly played football before I was diagnosed, and therefore I was not able to play football since I was diagnosed for a year. And that was painful. I couldn't do any physical activities as such, but the physical activity afterwards will come, and it did come, about maybe 4 or 5 months after the transplant, purely because of just natural progression by walking around shops, walking around other places, walking around the house, and just doing small exercises every day, even, you know, minor exercises, nothing too strenuous. It's hard at first. It's never going to be an overnight thing. It's always going to take time. I only started feeling normal again after a year, as in properly normal. It was able to handle a full game of football, handle walking around a theme park for the whole day, handle being on my feet all day, handle work.
Physically, the worst effects, without doubt, were immediately post-transplant. That I was lethargic, I couldn't really raise myself to even have visitors on a couple of occasions, but thankfully that was short-lived. And when I got out of hospital, that certainly helped, being in home surroundings. And then it was more a case of, how can I get back to doing what I used to enjoy doing sport-wise as soon as possible? But I had to recognise that it wouldn't happen overnight. I did start doing the racket sports after about 5-6 months, and again gradually doing a bit more each week or two, to the extent that probably by 9 months I was doing most things, albeit not to the same level, but I was doing most things after 9 months after the transplant. So, you know, it was gradually getting back. In fact, I remember speaking to my consultant after 9 months, and I said, I can run for 20 minutes now like I used to. I said, but I can't run uphill for very long without having to stop and walk for a little bit and then run again. And he said, why are you trying to run uphill? So that amused me somewhat. Just take it easy, and let your body decide how much you can do. But you know, don't be just satisfied with saying, oh, I'll do the same as I did last week. Always try and do that little bit more each week.
I got involved with the British Transplant Games through Chiara, who works at Anthony Nolan. She sent me an email through asking me, amongst other patients, probably who would be interested in taking part, because I like going to the gym, and post-transplant I've managed to do quite a few half marathons as well, and I try and keep that going as well. I thought, yeah, why not take part? So I'm lucky to say that I've managed to participate in 2 transplant games, the first one over in Newcastle and the ones that happened this year over in Liverpool. And my advice to anyone who's even thinking about doing it is just do it. It's amazing. It really, really is. It's such an amazing, friendly environment there.